Smelly peasant, she screamed, wiping her pristine white dress as if my very presence was a stain. To her, I was just a 58-year-old widow smelling of cow manure. She had no idea that a single signature of mine could bankrupt her entire family. Beside me, my son squeezed my hand and whispered, "Relax. Mum, tomorrow is the day." I lowered my head, hiding a smile. They would soon learn who truly owned this town. My name is Margaret Holloway, and I had never felt more out of place than I did standing in the center of the Crystal Lace Boutique. The air smelled of expensive lavender and judgment. I stood frozen, my hands trembling slightly as I looked at the pristine hem of the white silk gown. I had only meant to smooth a wrinkle, to be helpful. But the dust from my work boots had betrayed me. "Smelly peasant," Veronica screamed. The shrieking voice of my son's fiancée sliced through the quiet luxury of the shop like a rusted blade. She recoiled from me, clutching the fabric to her chest as if my touch carried a plague. "Do not touch it, God." "Look at it," Veronica yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the faint, grey smudge on the silk. "It's ruined. It smells like cow. Actually, it is mostly topsoil and dried hay," I wanted to say. But I bit my tongue. I was 58 years old, a woman who had built a life with her bare hands. Yet in this room, I was nothing but a nuisance. Clarissa, Veronica's mother, stepped forward. She wrinkled her nose, making no effort to hide her disgust. She looked immaculate in her designer suit, a sharp contrast to my faded flannel shirt and the jeans I had worn to feed the calves that morning. "Really? Margaret?" Clarissa sighed, her voice dripping with fake pity. "We tried to tell you to shower before coming into the city. That scent, it sticks to everything. Did you drive that ancient truck here? The fumes alone are enough to kill the mood." The boutique staff, 3 young women with perfect hair, giggled behind the counter. Veronica's bridesmaids, lounging on the velvet sofas, exchanged amused glances. They looked at me like I was a zoo animal that had escaped its cage. I gripped the strap of my old canvas tote bag, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to tell them about the dignity of labor, about the sweat that built empires, but I knew it would fall on deaf ears. Clarissa walked up to me, invading my personal space. She reached out and gripped my wrist, her nails digging into my skin hard enough to bruise. She leaned in close, lowering her voice so only I could hear, though the cruelty was loud enough. "Don't worry, dear," Clarissa hissed, a cold smile plastered on her face. "After the wedding, we will make some changes. We have been looking into a facility for you. A nice, sterile nursing home. Somewhere far away from the farm. Daniel shouldn't have to deal with this mud and stench forever. He deserves a clean break. And we will be more than happy to manage your assets while you rest." My breath hitched. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a weak, trembling smile. I just wanted to see the dress," I stammered, playing the part they expected. But inside, the humiliation hardened into something cold and sharp. This was not just about my clothes or the smell of the farm. They mentioned assets. They mentioned managing my affairs. This was a coup. They thought I was a senile old woman sitting on a gold mine of land, ripe for the taking. They wanted to lock me away and pave over my life. "I need some air," I whispered, pulling my arm from Clarissa's grip. I turned and walked out, my heavy boots thudding against the marble floor. The laughter followed me until the glass door swung shut. I stood on the sidewalk, gasping for the cool harbour view air. A moment later, the door opened again. Daniel came running out. He looked frantic. He saw me leaning against a lamp-post and rushed over. His eyes dropped to my wrist, where the angry red crescent marks from Clarissa's nails were already blooming against my skin. His face went dark. The boyish charm vanished, replaced by a terrifying intensity I had rarely seen. "She hurt you," Daniel stated, his voice low and dangerous. "It is nothing," I said, looking away. He grabbed my shoulders, turning me to face him. We stood in the parking lot, surrounded by six-figure luxury cars that gleamed in the afternoon sun. He pulled me into a fierce hug, burying his face in my grey hair, the hair they mocked, the hair that smelled of wind and earth. "I am so sorry, Mom," he whispered into my ear, his voice breaking. "I swear to you, I wanted to end it right there, but we have to wait. Just one more night." He pulled back, gripping my arms. "Relax, Mom," he said, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "Tomorrow is the day. Tomorrow, everything flips. They think they have won. Let them think it for 12 more hours." I looked deep into my son's eyes. There was no confusion there, no love-struck blindness. He was his father's son, after all. He was sharp, calculated, and ready to burn their world down to protect me. I nodded slowly, letting my shoulders slump, resuming the guise of the tired, beaten farm woman. "Okay, Danny," I said softly. "Go back inside. Do not make them suspicious." He hesitated, then kissed my forehead and turned back toward the boutique, putting his mask back on. I walked to my rusted pickup truck, parked defiantly between a Porsche and a Lexus. I climbed inside and locked the door. The silence of the cab was a relief. I pulled my phone from my bag. My hands were steady now. I navigated to a secure folder I had named Harvest Tomorrow. It was password protected. I typed the code and stared at the file inside. It was all there. The deeds, the contracts, the proof of ownership that made their wealth look like pocket change. My finger hovered over the screen. "Smelly peasant," I whispered to the empty truck, tasting the words. I looked at the boutique window, where I could see Veronica laughing, holding a glass of champagne. "Enjoy it while it lasts, dear," I murmured. My finger rested on the screen, ready to unleash the storm. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. 6 months ago, my life was measured in gallons of milk and bales of hay. I was the widow Holloway, a figure of pity in Ravenhill County. To the locals, I was just Margaret, a 58-year-old woman clinging to a dying farm, driving a battered pickup truck that rattled like a tin can, and wearing overalls permanently stained with grass and mud. They saw the calloused hands and the greying hair, but they did not see the mind behind them. They had forgotten, or perhaps they never knew, that before I married Frank and settled into this quiet life, I was a senior internal auditor for Everline Dominion. I spent 2 decades hunting down financial discrepancies and burying corporate negligence in paperwork. When Frank died in a tractor accident 5 years ago, the town expected me to sell the land and move into a condo. Instead, I took his life insurance settlement and every cent of our savings and made a silent gamble. I purchased a massive amount of stock in a small, struggling startup called Aurora Harvest Energy. Then, I signed a long-term contract allowing them to build wind turbines on the northern ridge of my property. I told no one, not my neighbours, and not even Daniel. To the world, I was just scraping by, to my bank account, I was quietly amassing a fortune as clean energy prices soared. Daniel had left the farm years ago to study in Harborview. He was now a software engineer at Northbridge Dynamics, a good man with a gentle heart who carried a heavy load of guilt. "Mom, are you sure you have enough for the heating bill this winter?" he would ask during our weekly calls. "I will be fine. Danny, the cows are producing well?" I would lie. I let him believe I was poor because I wanted him to build his own life, free from the shadow of unearned wealth. I wore my poverty like a suit of armor. It filtered out the greedy and the superficial. Then came that crisp evening in late October. Daniel pulled into the gravel driveway, his face glowing with a nervousness I had not seen since his high school prom. He was not alone. "Mom, this is Veronica," he said, beaming. Veronica stepped out of the car. She was the marketing manager for Silvercrest Partners, a private equity firm in the city. She looked like she had walked straight out of a catalogue, her beige trench coat spotless, her heels sinking precariously into the soft earth of my yard. "It is so lovely to meet you, Mrs. Holloway," Veronica said. Her voice was smooth, polished like a river stone. We sat in my kitchen, eating the apple pie I had baked that morning. Veronica was effusive with her praise. "Oh my, this is incredible," she said, touching a napkin to the corner of her mouth. "I have never tasted anything like this. You really must share the secret." But as she spoke, I watched her eyes. They did not smile. They roamed. Her gaze darted from the antique oak cabinets to the view of the rolling hills outside the window. It was not the look of a guest enjoying a rustic home. It was the cold, calculating stare of an appraiser valuing an asset. She was mentally counting the acreage. Daniel's phone began to buzz on the table. "Sorry, I have to take this. It is the server team," he said, looking apologetic. "I will be right back." The moment the screen door slammed shut behind him, the warmth vanished from the room. Veronica stood up and walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the distant white towers of the wind turbines spinning lazily against the twilight sky. "Those turbines," she said, her tone casual, though her posture was rigid. "They are on your land, aren't they? Who holds the lease contract? Is it Aurora Harvest?" I paused in the middle of stacking the plates. I let my hand tremble slightly, playing the part of the confused old woman. "Oh, I think so," I said, my voice wavering. "Some company with a leaf picture. They send a check now and then. It helps with the feed." Veronica turned to face me, her eyes narrowing, and the land deed she asked, stepping closer. "Is it all in your name? Or have you put it in a trust? You know, it can be very complicated for a single woman to manage all this. My husband handled all the paperwork years ago." I mumbled, looking down at my rough hands. I just try to keep the fences up." A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. She thought she had found exactly what she was looking for, a naive, overwhelmed widow sitting on a gold mine she did not understand. That night, after they had driven back to the city, I sat alone in the darkness of the kitchen. I pulled my old laptop from its hiding place under the floorboards in the pantry. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I logged into my brokerage account. The stock for Aurora Harvest Energy had jumped another 8% that week. The value of the farm, combined with the wind contracts, was now in the 8 figures. I stared at the numbers, and then I thought of Veronica's hungry eyes and her questions about the deed. My son. I whispered to the silence, feeling a cold resolve settle in my chest. I think I understand why they are suddenly so interested in the smell of our mud. The iron gates of the Elwood residence in Riverview Heights swung open with a silent, hydraulic hum. As Daniel drove our rental sedan up the winding driveway, I looked out at the manicured lawns that looked more like golf courses than front yards. This dinner was ostensibly to discuss the wedding details. But as we stepped out of the car and looked up at the towering limestone facade of the mansion, I knew better. This was an appraisal. They were checking the quality of the livestock before closing the deal. Clarissa Elwood met us at the double mahogany doors. She wore a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Margaret, so glad you could make the drive," Clarissa said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You must be exhausted. At your age, that drive from Ravenhill is quite a trek, isn't it?" "I manage just fine," I said softly, stepping into the foyer. We moved to the drawing room, a space filled with uncomfortable furniture and fragile sculptures. Edmund, Clarissa's husband, sat in a wingback chair. He was a quiet man with tired eyes who seemed to shrink whenever his wife entered the room. "Edmund, say hello," Clarissa commanded. "Good to see you." "Margaret," Edmund said, half rising before sinking back down as Clarissa shot him a sharp look. We sat. Tea was poured from a silver pot. Clarissa did not waste time on small talk. She leaned forward, her eyes scanning my face with clinical precision. "So, Margaret, how is your health holding up?" she asked, stirring her tea. "Living alone out there. It worries us. Have you had any falls recently? Dizzy spells? I am fit as a fiddle," I replied, keeping my voice shaky. Of course. Clarissa nodded, exchanging a glance with Veronica. "But accidents happen. Have you updated your will? Or perhaps assigned a medical power of attorney? It is just responsible planning. We would hate for you to be incapacitated without anyone legal to make decisions for you." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Before I could answer, Veronica breezed into the conversation, holding a heavy binder. "Speaking of planning," Veronica chirped, slamming the binder onto the coffee table, "I have finalized the venue. Lakeside Manor. It is perfect. We are looking at a budget of about $120,000 for the reception alone." She said the number casually, as if she were discussing the price of a sandwich. She did not look at me. She did not ask if I could contribute. It was a test to see if I would flinch, or perhaps an assumption that my son would shoulder the debt. "That seems expensive," Edmund started to say. "It is necessary. Dad?" Veronica snapped. "We have an image to maintain." Clarissa glared at her husband, and he closed his mouth, retreating into his silence. There was a secret in that silence, something heavy, but I did not have time to pass it. "Daniel, darling, why don't you and Veronica go look at the rose garden Clarissa suggested? I want to have a little girl talk with your mother." Daniel hesitated, looking at me with concern, but I gave him a reassuring nod. As soon as they left, Clarissa shifted closer. The air reeked of her expensive perfume and predatory intent. "Margaret, let's be realistic," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That farm, it is too much work for you. You are not going to live forever to look after it. I know a developer, a wonderful partner of Silvercrest, who specializes in relieving widows of such burdens. He pays cash. We could set you up in a very comfortable facility." I widened my eyes. feigning confusion. "Oh, I do not know," I stammered, twisting the strap of my handbag. "My husband, Frank. He always handled the papers. I get confused by all the legal words. I usually just sign where the nice lawyer tells me to." Clarissa's eyes lit up. It was the reaction she wanted. She saw a sheep ready for shearing. "Don't you worry." She patted my knee. "We will help you with the lawyers. Later." As we were leaving, I walked past the open patio door. Daniel and Veronica were standing near the fountain. Veronica had her back to me, her hand resting possessively on Daniel's chest. "You worry too much, babe," Veronica said, her voice carrying on the wind. "After the wedding, I will arrange everything. Your mum won't have to lift a finger. She won't even have to read the papers. We will make it so she just rests. Permanently." That night, back in the safety of Ravenhill, I sat in the back room of Lucille Grant's grocery store. The neon sign buzzed outside, casting a red glow over the counter. Lucille, my friend for 30 years, listened as I recounted every word. "They are not just after the land. Margaret," Lucille said, slamming her hand on the counter. "They are trying to declare you incompetent. It is the oldest trick in the book. Power of attorney, then the nursing home. Then they liquidate the assets." "I know," I said, my voice hard. "They think I am a senile old woman who just signs where she is told." I pulled out my phone. It was late, but I knew who I had to call. I dialed a number I had not used since my days at Everline Dominion. "Henry," I said, when the gruff voice answered. "It is Margaret Holloway." "Yes, the auditor." "I need to hire you." "No, not for taxes. I need to trigger the clauses in the Aurora harvest contracts, and I need to know how to stop a conservatorship before it starts." Henry Cole's office had not changed in 20 years. It still smelled of stale coffee and old legal briefs, a comforting scent compared to the sterile, predatory air of the Elwood mansion. Henry, a man whose suits were always slightly rumpled, but whose mind was sharper than a razor, listened to me in silence. I laid it all out, the sudden concern for my health, the questions about the will, and Veronica's obsession with the wind turbines. Henry leaned back, cleaning his spectacles with his tie. "Margaret," he said, his voice grave, "this is a textbook setup. If they get you to sign a medical power of attorney, they do not need a gun to rob you. They just need a friendly doctor to say you are confused. Once you are declared incompetent, they control the assets. They can dump you in a facility and liquidate the land before you can even make a phone call. I have not signed anything," I said, though my hands were cold. "But Daniel, he trusts them." "Then Daniel is a liability," Henry said bluntly. "I know you are hiding the extent of the estate from him to keep him grounded. But right now, that secrecy is a weapon they are using against you. He needs to know what is at stake. If he doesn't, he will be the tool they use to pry the farm from your hands." I nodded, the weight of his words settling on me. While we spoke, Henry handed me a manila folder from Lyle Morgan, a private investigator he had retained on my behalf. "Read this," Henry said. I opened the file. It was a dossier on Silvercrest Partners. The glossy exterior of Veronica's firm hid a rotting interior. They were drowning in bad debt. Their rural redevelopment projects were essentially strip mining operations for real estate, and they were currently being sued in 3 different counties. Veronica and Clarissa were listed as directors for several charities that appeared to be nothing more than tax shelters. They did not just want my land. They desperately needed it to cover their losses. That weekend, I summoned Daniel back to the farm. I told him the water heater was acting up, a lie that I knew would bring him running. When he arrived, I did not take him to the utility room. Instead, I led him down to the basement, past the shelves of canned peaches, to the heavy iron safe hidden behind a stack of old feed sacks. I spun the dial and pulled the heavy door open. Inside sat the deeds, the stock certificates for Aurora Harvest Energy, and the bank statements I had hidden for 5 years. I placed the stack of papers on the dusty workbench. "What is this?" Mom Daniel asked, confused. "Look at the bottom line." "Daniel," I said softly. He picked up the latest statement from the brokerage account. His eyes widened. He looked from the paper to me, then back to the paper. This is 8 figures," he stammered. "Mum, you told me you were struggling. I sent you checks for heating oil. Why would you lie to me because I wanted you to be you?" I said, my voice trembling. "I wanted you to build a life on your own merit, not waiting for a payout. And I wanted to be sure that anyone who loved you for your heart, not for my checkbook." Daniel dropped the paper, his face flushing with a mix of hurt and anger. "So you tested me. You tested Veronica. I protected us. I corrected him. And I was right to do so. Listen to this." I pulled out my phone and played the recording I had captured 2 days prior. It was a pocket dial, or perhaps fate. But Veronica's voice rang out clear and cold in the quiet basement. "Don't worry. Mother? The old hag won't last 6 months in the facility. I'll have the power of attorney by the honeymoon. We can rezone the land by spring and liquidate the livestock. It's disgusting that I have to be nice to her. She smells like wet dog." Daniel stood frozen. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and ghostly. He looked at the phone, then at me. The betrayal broke over him like a wave. He slumped against the workbench, burying his face in his hands, and his shoulders began to shake. "I loved her," he choked out, his voice thick with tears. I thought she was the one." I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him, letting him cry on my shoulder just as he had when he was a boy and scraped his knees. We stood there for a long time among the dust and the millions of dollars of hidden paper. Finally, Daniel pulled back. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. The sadness was still there, but beneath it, something harder was forming. He looked at the safe, then at the recording on my phone. "Mom," he said, his voice steadying. "Do you think I am like Dad? He never let anyone walk all over him. He overturned that corruption case at the Union Hall. You are exactly like him," I said fiercely. Daniel took a deep breath. "You do not have to fight this alone anymore," he whispered. "If they want a show, let's give them one. From now on, we act together." The war room was not a bunker, but Henry Cole's cluttered office on 4th Street. The blinds were drawn, shutting out the harbour view afternoon, creating a space where the 3 of us, Henry, Daniel, and I, could plot the dismantling of the Elwood family. We were no longer planning a wedding. We were choreographing a demolition. "We do not cancel the wedding," Henry said, pacing the worn rug. "If we cancel now, they retreat, lawyer up, and bury you in litigation for years. No, we let them walk right up to the altar. We let them think they have won." Daniel sat in the corner, his face pale but his eyes hard. The boy who had cried in the basement was gone. "So, I have to keep playing the fool?" Daniel asked, his voice tight. I have to let her touch me. Let her talk about our future like she isn't planning to put my mother in a cage. You are not a fool. Daniel? I said, reaching across the desk to squeeze his hand. You are the bait, and you are the witness. Henry took my phone and installed a hidden application. This records directly to a secure cloud server, Henry explained. It starts recording the moment it detects voice patterns. Keep it in your purse, face down. Clarissa is going to take you to consult with her lawyers. Let her record everything. The next phase was the trap. I purposely left a drafted document on the coffee table at Daniel's apartment when I knew Veronica was coming over. It was a draft will from 10 years ago, listing my total assets at less than $50,000. I watched from the kitchen, hidden by the angle of the refrigerator. Veronica walked in, saw the paper, and froze. She glanced around, checking if the coast was clear, then whipped out her phone. She snapped 3 photos of the document. She did not look disappointed by the low number. She looked relieved. It confirmed her bias I was poor, which meant I was weak. She left her fingerprints on the paper and her digital footprint on the photo metadata. Meanwhile, Henry's investigator, Lyle Morgan, brought us the smoking gun. Silvercrest Partners is leveraging a buyout of the entire Ravenhill Valley, Lyle told us, spreading maps over Henry's desk. They have investors lined up for a massive commercial rezoning project. But the deal hinges on one key parcel, the Holloway farm. The internal emails I found. They refer to it as the Keystone. They have already promised the investors that the land is secured. They sold my land before they even stole it, I said, a cold anger settling in my stomach. I made a private, encrypted call to the CEO of Aurora Harvest Energy. We had a long history of mutual profit. I laid out my proposal. I would transfer the land rights into a non-profit trust dedicated to clean energy research, the Holloway Land and Wind Trust. It means the land can never be sold for commercial development. I told the CEO, it locks the Elwoods out forever, but we keep this quiet until the wedding. Henry drafted the trust papers immediately. The terms were ironclad. Daniel was the sole beneficiary, but with a poison pill clause, any spouse of the beneficiary had to sign a pre-nuptial agreement waiving all claims to the trust, or the assets would freeze and donate themselves to charity. Daniel played his part with terrifying precision. He went on dates with Veronica, acting the submissive, love-struck puppy. But every night, he sent me the audio files. I listened to one recording while sipping tea in my kitchen. The sound of Veronica's voice was crystal clear. God, he's so clingy today, Veronica was saying to someone, likely her mother. I just need to get through the ceremony. Then we ship the old woman off. She's like a summer cicada, noisy, annoying, and hopefully dead by winter. She is just a land card. Mum? Once we play it, we discard the deck. My hand did not shake. I simply saved the file under Evidence 04. The final preparation was my performance. Henry sat opposite me, drilling me on how to appear legally incompetent without actually being so. When they show you the power of attorney, Henry instructed, do not get angry, get confused. Like this, I adjusted my glasses and squinted, letting my jaw go slack. I do not understand what fiduciary means. Is that like a doctor perfect? Henry grinned. Make them explain it to you like you are 5 years old. Make them feel superior. Overconfidence is a slow poison. He closed the file and looked at me with a gleam in his eye. There is one last thing, Henry said. I made a call to an old contact at the Harborview Ledger, Nina Brooks. She is an investigative journalist hungry for a story. She has been trying to nail Silvercrest for predatory real estate practices for 2 years. I told her to buy a nice dress and get ready for a wedding. She is coming to the reception, I asked. She is coming for the blood, Henry replied. Relax. Margaret, the board is set. The conference room at Sterling and Pike was colder than a meat locker. I sat on one side of the polished granite table, looking small and withered in my faded cardigan. Across from me, a junior associate with slicked-back hair slid a stack of documents toward my trembling hands. Just a few standard formalities. Mrs. Holloway, the lawyer said, his smile tight and practiced. These are the healthcare proxy and a limited financial power of attorney. They simply ensure that if, heaven forbid, you feel unwell, your family can step in to help. I peered at the papers through my reading glasses. I saw the trap immediately. Buried in the dense block of text in Section 4, Paragraph 3, was a clause granting the agent the authority to determine long-term residential relocation for safety and well-being. It was the legal equivalent of a shovel digging my grave. But I stuttered, looking up at Clarissa. I feel fine. I take my vitamins. Clarissa sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. Margaret, please. Do you want to be a burden to Daniel forever? She asked, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. At the nursing home, you would have professionals to bathe you and feed you. And that land, it is just sitting there growing weeds when it could create so much value for the city. Do not be selfish. I bit my lip, forcing tears into my eyes. I don't understand all these big words. I whimpered, pushing the papers back slightly. I should take this to Mrs. Gable at the church. She reads real good. She can tell me if it is okay to sign. Clarissa's eyes flashed with irritation, but she quickly masked it. She assumed I was too simple to have a lawyer. So a church lady was a harmless delay. Fine, Clarissa snapped. But bring them to the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Signed. Later that afternoon, the humiliation moved from the quiet law office to the bustling floor of the Crystal Lace Boutique and the adjoining high-end bistro where we were tasting the menu. The air was thick with the scent of roasted duck and expensive perfume. When I moved to sit next to Daniel, Veronica blocked my path. Actually, Mrs. Holloway, she said, her smile brittle. Why don't you sit at that table over there by the window? But the family is sitting here, I said. Yes. Well. Veronica wrinkled her nose, waving a hand in front of her face. The ventilation is better over there. We don't want the earthy aroma to ruin the appetite of the other guests. It clings to you. Margaret, honestly, don't forget to scrub hard before the wedding. Lakeside Manor isn't used to the smell of a barn. The waiters nearby froze. A few of Veronica's friends giggled behind their napkins. I lowered my head and shuffled to the small, isolated table, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Daniel started to stand up, his jaw set. But I caught his eye and gave a tiny, imperceptible shake of my head. Wait. I sat alone, picking at a bread roll, while they laughed and clinked crystal glasses 10 feet away. After the meal, we moved to the fitting area for a final adjustment of Veronica's reception dress. I stood up to get a better look, holding a small cup of dipping sauce I had foolishly carried from the table. My hand shook, whether from nerves or rage. I could not tell, and a single drop of red sauce splashed onto the hem of the white dress. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Veronica exploded. "Smelly peasant," she screamed. The sound tore through the boutique. She recoiled, slapping my hand away so hard the cup flew across the room. "Can you not touch anything of value?" Veronica shrieked, her face twisted and ugly. "You ruin everything. You stink. You are clumsy. And you are useless." I stood paralyzed as the staff rushed to dab at the dress. I looked to Clarissa for help, but she only crossed her arms, looking at me with cold disdain. "She is right, Margaret," Clarissa said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "You should be grateful we even let you sit in the same room. But don't worry. Soon you will have a private room at Riverview Care. It is very sterile there. You won't have to ruin luxury fabrics ever again." They had said it out loud, in front of witnesses. Daniel stepped forward. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, the veins bulging against the skin. He looked like he was about to tear the room apart, but then he took a breath. His shoulders dropped, and he put on the mask we had practiced. "Mom." "Come on," he said, feigning an exasperated sigh, though his grip on my arm was gentle and protective. "Let's get you out of here before you break something else." He dragged me out of the boutique, away from the laughter and the insults. As soon as the glass doors shut behind us, the cool evening air hit my face. Daniel pulled me close, shielding me from the world. "Relax." "Mum?" He whispered into my hair, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Tomorrow is the day everything flips." That night, the farmhouse was quiet. The only sound was the wind howling through the valley. I sat at my kitchen table. On the left side lay the stack of paperwork Clarissa had given me the power of attorney that would strip me of my rights. On the right side lay the contracts with Aurora Harvest and the deed transfer to the Holloway Land and Wind Trust. I ran my finger over the text of the trust. It was a weapon of mass destruction wrapped in legal stationery. "Smelly peasant?" I murmured to the empty room. The shame that had burned in my chest all day began to cool, hardening into something solid and unbreakable, like the granite of the ridge. I picked up a pen. I did not sign Clarissa's papers. Instead, I signed the final transfer order for the trust. "See you at the altar, Veronica," I whispered. The chandeliers of Lakeside Manor glittered like frozen tears above us, casting fractured light over the long tables draped in white linen. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, fireworks bloomed silently over the artificial lake, a display that cost more than my farm earned in a year. The air buzzed with the chatter of Harborview's elite, and phones were held high, live streaming every toast and every fake smile to the world. I walked into this den of wolves wearing a simple, dark blue dress. I had pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I wore no jewelry, no makeup to hide the lines on my face. I was still the farm woman they despised. But tonight, my spine was steel. Beside me walked Robert, a man in a charcoal suit. To the Elwoods, he was a nobody, just a friend of the family I had asked to bring along. Clarissa and Veronica barely spared him a glance, their eyes scanning the room for hedge fund managers and real estate tycoons. They did not know that the man holding my elbow was the CEO of Aurora Harvest Energy, the company that had turned my windy hills into a gold mine. We took our seats. Clarissa tapped a crystal glass with a silver spoon, the sharp ting-ting-ting silencing the room. She stood up, holding a microphone as if it were a scepter. "Welcome, everyone." Clarissa beamed, The camera flashes, reflecting in her eyes. It is so wonderful to see two worlds collide tonight. Our family comes from the polished stones of Wall Street, and Daniel's family comes from, well, the pastures of Ravenhill. A ripple of polite laughter went through the crowd. We are getting used to the natural smell, Clarissa continued, wrinkling her nose playfully at the camera. It is very earthy, but we are sure we can scrub the country out of the boy. Right. The laughter grew louder. I saw Veronica smirk behind her champagne flute. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. Then it was Daniel's turn. He took the microphone from Clarissa. The room expected a toast to the bride, a speech about love and the future. Daniel looked at Veronica, then out at the crowd. He did not smile. I want to start by expressing my gratitude, Daniel said, his voice steady but heavy, specifically to my mother. The woman who was called a smelly peasant in this very room's sister venue yesterday. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. A few guests lowered their phones, while others zoomed in. My mother raised me alone. Daniel continued, ignoring Veronica's hand, reaching out to stop him. You see a woman in a cheap dress. I see a woman who worked double shifts as a senior internal auditor for Everline Dominion during the day and milked cows at 4 a.m. so I could have books for school. She smells like hard work. She smells like dignity. Veronica's face went pale. Clarissa stepped forward, her eyes wide with warning, but Daniel turned his back on her. Before this wedding proceeds, Daniel said, his voice turning cold, there is a matter of paperwork. My fiancée and her mother were very eager for my mother to sign some documents regarding her assets and her future housing. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded papers, the power of attorney, and the nursing home admission forms. He walked over to me and handed me the microphone. I stood up. My legs felt strong. I looked at Clarissa, then at the camera lenses pointed at me. Thank you. Son, I said softly. I held up the papers Clarissa had given me. These documents would have given the Elwood family control over my life and my land. I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the room. They assumed I was just a simple old woman who would sign where she was told. But I paused, letting a small, sharp smile touch my lips. Luckily, I still remember how to read the fine print. It is an old habit from my 20 years auditing corporate fraud. Clarissa looked like she had been slapped. I did not sign your papers. Clarissa, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a different document, the blue folder glowing under the chandelier light. Instead, I signed this, I announced. As of this morning, the entirety of the Ravenhill estate has been transferred into the Holloway Land and Wind Trust. I threw the folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud between the crystal glasses. The trust is non-profit, I continued, watching the blood drain from Veronica's face. It is dedicated to clean energy development. The land cannot be sold. It cannot be rezoned for commercial use. And it certainly cannot be liquidated by a daughter-in-law looking to cover her investment firm's bad debts. What Veronica whispered, her voice trembling. But the investors promised. The land is gone. Veronica, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. You wanted the peasant's land. Now, all you have is the peasant's son, and I don't think he is for sale anymore either. The room erupted into whispers. I saw Robert, the Aurora CEO, raise his glass to me from the shadows. Clarissa stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. The trap had snapped shut, and the whole world was watching. The silence in the ballroom was shattered not by applause, but by the heavy footsteps of Robert, the man I had introduced merely as a friend. He walked to the microphone, adjusting his tie with the confidence of a man who controlled half the state's power grid. If I may add a footnote, Robert boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Aurora Harvest Energy has not only partnered with the Holloway Trust, we have just ratified a 20-year extension on the wind rights. The projected revenue for the trust over the next decade is, conservatively speaking, somewhere north of $40 million. Ravenhill isn't just a farm anymore. It is the powerhouse of this county. The gasp that tore through the room was audible. $40 million. I saw the calculation happening behind the eyes of every guest. Suddenly, I wasn't the smelly peasant in a cheap dress. I was the most powerful woman in the room. In the corner, I spotted Nina Brooks, the journalist from the Harborview Ledger. She wasn't eating or drinking. She was typing furiously on her phone, her eyes darting between me and the frozen forms of the Elwood family. She smelled blood. Clarissa's clutch bag began to vibrate violently on the table. She snatched up her phone, her face draining of colour as she read the notification. It was an alert from her bank. Thanks to the dossier Lyle Morgan had anonymously forwarded to the regulators that morning, her credit lines were frozen. The financial IV drip that kept Silvercrest Partners alive had just been yanked out. Veronica moved first. She grabbed my arm, her grip painful, and yanked Daniel with her other hand. "We need to speak. Now," she hissed. She dragged us into a small, private bridal suite off the main hall, slamming the heavy oak door behind us. The muffled sounds of the party disappeared, replaced by the sound of Veronica's heavy, panic-stricken breathing. She spun around, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. The sweet daughter-in-law act was gone. "You think you are smarter than us?" Veronica screamed, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin my wedding? You are nothing. You are just a lucky peasant who hit the lottery with some wind. You belong in a barn, shoveling manure, not managing a trust fund." I stood calmly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. Beside me, Daniel didn't flinch. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was glowing red. "Thank you." "Veronica," Daniel said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I was worried I wouldn't get a clear recording of you calling my mother a peasant again. You do not mind if this is entered into evidence during the competency hearing? Do you wouldn't," she stammered, stepping back. Clarissa burst into the room, breathless. "It is all a misunderstanding," Clarissa cried, her hands fluttering. "Daniel, honey, we were just trying to protect your mother. We wanted her safe." I reached into my purse and pulled out the photocopy of the power of attorney she had tried to force on me. I had taken a yellow highlighter and marked the predatory clauses. I slammed it onto the makeup vanity. "Is this protection?" "Clarissa," I asked, my voice hard. Section 4, paragraph 3. Authority to transfer the principal to a secure, long-term memory care unit without patient consent. "You didn't want me safe. You wanted me incarcerated." Clarissa opened her mouth to lie again, but a thunderous knocking on the door cut her off. Mrs. Elwood. Miss Elwood, a male voice called out, stern and authoritative. This is the State Securities Commission. We have officers from the Financial Crimes Division here. We need you to step out. Now. Veronica's eyes went wide. She looked at the door, then at me, realizing the walls were closing in. Mum, she whimpered to Clarissa. What is happening? I don't know, Clarissa whispered, clutching her chest. Open it, Daniel said, coldly. Veronica's hand trembled as she reached for the brass handle. She cracked the door open. The hallway was not empty. It was filled with uniformed officers and men in dark suits. But behind them, like a pack of wolves, was the press. Henry had timed it perfectly. The moment the door opened, the hallway erupted in blinding white light. Camera flashes popped like strobes. Shutters clicked in a frenzy. Nina Brooks was right at the front, phone raised. Mrs. Elwood. Is it true Silvercrest Partners is a Ponzi scheme built on elder abuse? A reporter shouted. Veronica. Did you plan to institutionalize your mother-in-law to seize her land? Another yelled. As the officers moved in to escort the two women away, Nina hit send on her tweet. I could almost feel the vibration of phones in the ballroom as the notification landed. Lesson of the day, never underestimate the smelly peasant from Ravenhill County. The Elwood Empire is crumbling in real time. Justice for Margaret Silvercrest scandal. I stood in the doorway, bathed in the camera flashes, watching the dismantling of the people who had tried to erase me. Daniel put his arm around my shoulder. Ready to go. Mom? He asked. Not yet, I said, watching Clarissa try to hide her face from a camera. I want to watch them walk all the way to the car. 3 weeks later, the air in Harborview County Courtroom 4B smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Daniel and Henry. My hands were folded on the oak table, steady and calm. Across the aisle, Clarissa and Veronica sat with a young, terrified-looking associate from Sterling and Pike. The senior partners had abandoned them, sensing a losing battle. They wore their expensive suits, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by the dark circles of sleepless nights and the jittery energy of the hunted. The back of the courtroom was packed. I spotted Nina Brooks in the second row, her pen poised over a notebook. The press had smelled blood in the water, and the Elwood name was the chum, the district attorney. A sharp woman named Mrs. Vance wasted no time. She treated the opening statement like a surgical incision. Your Honor, Mrs. Vance began, pacing before the bench. This is not a simple family dispute. This is a calculated, premeditated conspiracy to strip a vulnerable senior citizen of her autonomy and her assets. She played the audio file first. Veronica's voice filled the high-ceilinged room, tinny, but unmistakable. She is just a land card. Mom. Once we play it, we discard the deck. Veronica squeezed her eyes shut. Clarissa stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched tight. Next came the emails from the Silvercrest server. They were projected onto a screen for the jury. One subject line read, Ravenhill Project. Urgent need to secure owner in long-term care facility. I took the stand first. I did not cry. I did not tremble. I wanted the court to see the woman they had tried to erase. Mrs. Holloway. Mrs. Vance asked. Can you describe the incident at the boutique? She called me a smelly peasant, I stated clearly. She screamed it in front of the staff and customers. It was not just an insult. Your Honor. It was a declaration. To them, I was not a person. I was livestock. I was something dirty that needed to be washed away, so they could get to the land beneath my feet. When Daniel took the stand, the tension in the room spiked. He looked at Veronica, his eyes filled with a sad finality. Daniel, Henry asked him, did your fiancé ever discuss the legal mechanisms for removing your mother's rights? Yes, Daniel replied, his voice cracking slightly before finding its strength. She told me, if your mother does not sign, I have a doctor friend who can write a few lines about cognitive decline. The court will believe a doctor over a farm woman. She said it was for the best. A gasp rippled through the gallery. The judge, a stern man with grey eyebrows, frowned deeply and made a note. The young lawyer for the Elwoods stood up, trying to salvage the wreckage. Objection. Your Honor. This is hearsay. And frankly, Mrs. Holloway is clearly sensitive about her background. Perhaps she misinterpreted their concern for greed. Henry did not object. He simply slid a document across the table. Your Honor, Henry said. If we are discussing motive, let us look at the assets in question. The Holloway Land and Wind Trust is currently valued at over $40 million. This was not about concern. This was a heist. Then came the final blow. We called Edmund Elwood. The older man walked to the witness box slowly. He looked 10 years older than he had at the dinner. He refused to look at his wife or daughter. Mr. Elwood, Henry asked softly. Were you aware of the plan to institutionalize Margaret Holloway? Edmund gripped the railing of the witness box. He took a long, shaky breath. I was, he whispered. Did you approve of it? No, Edmund said, his voice gaining a sudden, desperate volume. I told them it was wrong. I told them Margaret was a good woman, but Clarissa, she said we needed the liquidity. She said Silvercrest was drowning. Did they say anything else? Mr. Elwood, Henry pressed. Edmund closed his eyes. Tears leaked out from under his eyelids. I heard them talking in the study. Edmund choked out. Veronica said, if the old hag dies soon, the better. It saves us the nursing home fees. Clarissa let out a strangled cry. Veronica's face turned a sickly shade of green. The judge slammed his gavel down, cutting through the sudden roar of the crowd. Order, the judge bellowed. Order in this court. He looked at the defense table with undisguised disgust. Based on the testimony provided, the judge ruled, his voice booming. I am granting the temporary restraining order. The defendants are to stay at least 200 yards away from Mrs. Holloway and Mr. Holloway at all times. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcript of today's proceedings to the District Attorney's Office with a recommendation to open a criminal investigation into conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. The gavel banged down like a gunshot. We walked out of the courtroom into a wall of noise. The doors swung open, and the flashes blinded us. Reporters were shouting questions. Microphones were thrust in our faces. I saw Nina Brooks standing near the exit. She held up her phone, showing me the headline on the Harborview Ledger's homepage. It featured a photo of me holding Daniel's hand, head held high. The headline read, Smelly Peasant Ravenhill Farmer Flips Harborview Finance. Mrs. Holloway, Mrs. Holloway, a reporter yelled. How does it feel to take down a dynasty? I stopped on the courthouse steps. I looked at the cameras, then at Daniel. It feels, I said, like the air is finally clearing. 3 days after the court ruling, the Grand Hall of Aurora. Harvest energy was buzzing with an energy that felt very different from the nervous tension of the courtroom. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, illuminating the banners that hung from the rafters. On the stage, 2 logos stood side by side, the sleek, modern leaf of Aurora Harvest and the newly designed crest of the Holloway Land and Wind Trust. I sat on the stage, not in the shadows, but right in the center. The room was packed with local media, representatives from elder advocacy groups, and half the population of Ravenhill County. They were not here to judge my clothes or my scent. They were here to listen. Robert, the CEO of Aurora, stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are proud to announce an expansion of the Ravenhill Wind Project, but more importantly, we are launching the Elder Landowner Protection Fund, and I am honored to introduce its honorary advisor, a woman who single-handedly stopped a hostile takeover by opaque, predatory developers." He did not name Silvercrest, but a murmur of recognition rippled through the crowd. Robert turned and gestured to me. "Please welcome Margaret Holloway." I walked to the podium. My hands, calloused from years of farm work and stained with ink from years of auditing, gripped the wood. I looked out at the sea of faces. "A few days ago," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I was called a smelly peasant. I was told that I did not belong at the table because I carried the scent of the earth." I paused, looking directly into the camera lens that was broadcasting live to the city. But when they said I smelled, they were not smelling mud. I continued, leaning in closer to the microphone. They were smelling vulnerability. They smelled someone they thought they could toss out like a bag of trash. The problem was never the smell. It was the power. They thought they had it all. And today, we are taking it back for people like me. As I spoke those words, the massive LED screen behind me flickered and changed. It was not part of the presentation. It was a live feed from the courthouse press room. A breaking news banner flashed in urgent red. "Just in Clarissa Elwood and Veronica Elwood indicted on multiple counts of conspiracy to commit elder abuse and wire fraud. Silvercrest Partners assets frozen by federal regulators." The auditorium erupted. Gasps turned into shouts of disbelief, followed by a wave of applause that started from the back, where the farmers of Ravenhill stood, and rolled forward like thunder. I did not turn around to look at the screen. I did not need to see their downfall. I had lived through their cruelty. I did not need to revel in their ruin. I looked down at Daniel. He was standing in the front row, looking up at me. The shame that had once shadowed his eyes when he looked at my muddy boots was gone, replaced by a fierce, overwhelming pride. He was crying, but he was smiling. He turned to the reporters who were shouting my name and simply pointed at the stage, mouthing, "That is my mother." The press conference ended in a standing ovation that lasted for 5 minutes. As I stepped down from the stage, the cameras flashed in a blinding rhythm. Daniel pushed through the crowd, ignoring the microphones, and wrapped me in a tight hug. "You did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled back and looked at me, wiping a tear from his cheek. "Relax, Mum," he said, echoing the words he had spoken in the parking lot, but this time with a lightness that made my heart soar. "Tomorrow is just another day on the farm. But this time, the whole world knows who you are." We turned and walked toward the exit, arm in arm. We stepped out of the hall and into the bright, clean afternoon sun. In the distance, on the horizon of Ravenhill, The wind turbines turned slowly and majestically, a silent testament to the storm we had weathered and the victory we had won. The knot of the smelly peasant had been untied, and I was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Margaret's revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.